Oh, no one gets to see how the magic is made.
Oh, God. Make it work, make it work. Okay. Yes. Yes.
Ready?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. I think so.
You want to talk about that?
All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the June WordPressDC meetup. Tonight we have one of the organizers, Casey, who's going to be talking about internet acronyms. So, without much further ado, I'm here to introduce Casey himself.
You don't know anything about me, do you?
He is the most dedicated WordPressDC member because he travels the farthest to be here.
True. I come from another state.
He comes from another state.
So do I.
Not that other state. Yeah, this guy really loves this meetup so much that he commutes longer than I would ever deal with in a week of traveling just to come to the meetup tonight. So without further ado, here is, let me guys see, Casey.
Hey, thank you, everybody. I might drop the mic, so I hate microphones and I love broadcasting my voice. Yeah, let's just do that. Can you guys hear me okay? Huh? Yep, the microphone's right here, and everyone's going to love that. Can you guys hear me okay back there? Leland? Good? Okay, cool. Excellent. All right, so there's like a couple of things here. I'm operating the streaming and social media all at the same time. I think it's set. Okay, so is anybody part of the Advanced WordPress Facebook group at all? A handful of people? Okay, so last Friday, I posted a meaningless post there that talked about this presentation, asking people what acronyms they'd like to know, and it blew up and people got really upset. That was right before I left for Philadelphia too, and Philadelphia is a 5-hour trip for me. So I just want to show it because it's kind of fun, kind of a meta-analysis thing. So this is, there's 130 total posts, and by the end of it, people were swearing at me and the mods to remove it because people weren't reading the previous comments and they kept adding things that were already there. So it's just kind of fun. Where did it go? There it is. Okay, so 30 web acronyms in 30 minutes. I had 23 at the time, 121 total comments. So right now, I'm going to repost a second thing just to see where it goes, saying that this is the fruits of your labor. And this is the stream if anybody wants to view it. Now, the Advanced WordPress Facebook group has like 1,500 people, and typically we get only like 5 people streaming on the Google Hangout. So I'm sure we'll get like 6 or 7 when I post this. So if you want, you can like go in and comment and be a jerk and stuff just for fun. Okay, that's that meta thing. Now let's do Keynote. No. Avert your eyes. Okay. All right. Cool. Welcome to the internet. So we welcome to WordPressDC. This is their first time here tonight? Show of hands, real quick. Awesome. Okay. How many people would say they're new to WordPress? Show of hands too. Okay. Good. Yeah. So DC is a complicated place. It has really high expert levels and really low introductory people, and it's hard to build a meetup around that because we want to please everybody without being like insultingly simple or insultingly over people's heads. So we decided, we vaguely decided that we're going to do an introductory topic tonight about internet acronyms for people that may kind of know or have no idea. This should hopefully by the end of it give you some context for internet technologies that you may have heard about and how they all work together and give you sort of like a big picture understanding of how things work. My name is Casey. I'm a full stack consultant. I run my own freelance WordPress shop called PatchWorks. I just launched myself like a month ago. I'm hoping to do premium themes and plugins, but none of that exists yet. So for now, I just go where people will pay me. I like fast cars and fast websites. And hey, okay. A few laughs, good. Just kidding, I drive a Miata. I like light cars and lightweight websites. So one of my personal interests is what's known as the digital divide, which is we have a lot of technological resources and know-how, but it's split between the haves and the have-nots. Boom. Okay, so this is a map of Virginia. Most of you will probably be familiar with the bluish parts, but apparently there's also a ton of like land mass west towards like the center of the country. I live in the red circle, that's Harrisonburg. And I'm also really active in the Charlottesville meetup group, which is Blue. There I pointed out the Mountain of Death, which is the Afton Mountain, and then DC, of course, is the blue one up there. So I drove up 2 hours today because I love it so much. So the digital divide is both geographic, but it's also technical. So in the valley there, where the 81 corridor is, you leave 10 feet on either side, and you're stuck with old dial-up internets, or sometimes no internet at all. It gets very rurally. And also, I'm from Western Virginia, which is not the same as West Virginia. So to clarify that. Okay. Good, more laughs. Okay, so what I'm looking to do tonight specifically, WordPress users and technical literacy. I talked to like 3 of you tonight, and everybody mentioned the very first thing, and this is how I felt a few months ago. I'm not very technical savvy. That was the very first caveat that they threw out, as if like the hounds were going to be released and they're going to be dragged out of here because they're not technically savvy and they should not be here. WordPress, by definition, is like a populist technology stack. And so you shouldn't really know a whole lot about anything, and that's why you're here, and that's great. So part of this might be redundant because you might already know a whole lot, but part of it won't be. And I'm trying to introduce new terms. I had a whole narrative in my head driving up here, and I've already lost it. That's fine. So, okay, here, notes. Technical literacy, essentially, is what I'm getting at. How can you have an informed discussion with users and developers if people don't know the simple terminology to begin with? They need to not only know it, but understand it. And going forward these next few decades, the digital divide might get wider if technology continues to enhance and people continue to stay behind. So simple presentations like this will hopefully bridge the gap and let people know how things work. Okay. All right, so we have 6 groups of acronyms tonight. And they're broken up into 3 segments. The first 2 are the backbone of the internet and protocols. The second grouping is the browser and server acronyms. And then the third grouping is interface and advanced interface acronyms. I suppose I'm supposed to be doing something very posh and like professional and like hold questions to the end, but I don't really work like that. I'm going to go in 3 segments because I will forget stuff. So I'm going to pause in between the major segments and stop and ask for questions so we can clarify them at that point. Sound good? Any questions so far before we begin?
Stack.
Stack, good. Okay, so technologies work together and different people build different things. There's this idea of a black box like a toaster. You don't care how the toaster works as long as you put in bread and get toast on the outside. Somebody specializes in making the toaster, somebody specializes in making the bread. Put 2 together, you get toast. So that's a stack of technologies. Bread, toast is a stack. Somebody makes the butter. Okay, hungry analogy, apparently. We'll, as we go forward, we'll talk more about specific technology stacks that makes more sense about how the technologies are layered and how specific technologies work together. Good question, though. Any others? Good? Okay. And if I'm boring, you can just boo me out of the stage, off the stage. So, backbone of the internet. There are 5 acronyms that we're going to talk about. Oh, the slides are live right now, too, on my website at patch.works/internet. My Twitter and all that stuff is on there, too, so feel free to reach out. So the internet is what is known as the network of networks. It is the hardware, and the hardware only, that runs everything and puts it all together. The internet is both an abstract idea and a tangible set of technologies that work together. The internet can be all devices that have ever been made, satellites and phones and laptops and computers and these new home devices and little tiny devices. Anything that can go on the internet is a potential part of the internet. That's the abstract idea. But then there's a specific set of technology stacks that make the internet, and we'll talk about those too. The important piece to point out, and this is the second acronym now, WWW, is that the World Wide Web and the internet are entirely different constructs. The WWW, the World Wide Web, is a subset of the internet. And people use them interchangeably, but you'll be smarter and you can like wag your finger at people when they use it incorrectly in the future. So the internet is for transferring all data pretty much everywhere through hardware, the pipes as they're so called. But all types of data is pushed through the internet. The World Wide Web is a subset, and that's only web pages. Specifically, web pages that are browsed in or seen through browsers, like Netscape, Internet Explorer, Firefox, iPhone, Safari, sometimes even Opera, if you're lucky. So the third acronym then is, we're going to just jump right off the deep end, is TCP/IP. And this is your first example of a stack. Who's heard of TCP/IP before, but doesn't really, okay, who doesn't really know what it means? Yeah, sure, all you guys. Anybody want to seriously volunteer and kind of explain TCP/IP real quick? Like just in a sentence? You want to? Go for it.
It's how different computers talk to one another.
Yeah, that's very good. So this is our first protocol of the night, and machines talking to each other is the word protocol. TCP/IP was invented and has been continually refined upon, but it's like a 1970, early, like 60, 70 technology that's been refined upon over and over again. TCP/IP, the two most important things that for us that it introduces is the concept of addresses. I'm sure you've heard of an IP address. That's an internet protocol, and that has the 123.45.67.89. It's like 4 segments like that. And also there's this thing called IP6 that we'll ignore right now. And also the idea of a port. And I have this extended transportation analogy that I'm going to use in a little bit here that will kind of fall apart. But the port is how it's a specific sub-address on the machine that is used for only that protocol. It's hot in here. Okay. So acronym number 4 is DNS, which stands for Domain Name System or Domain Name Servers. And essentially all it is, it allows you to use a .com name instead of the IP addresses, so it's more human readable. So you can go to google.com instead of 8.8.8.8 or whatever their IP address is. And that uses a TLD, which is called a top-level domain. And the top-level domain is the end section of a URL, like .com, .org, .net. That's the very top part of the domain. And yeah, good so far? Questions? Good? Pretty easy? Okay. So that's the backbone acronyms. Now is the protocol section of this. So the analogy is, now I'm getting fried up here, so we'll see if I can string this together. The worst thing I could do right now is introduce a bad technical analogy. It's like a cardinal sin, because I want to like teach the right thing, and the analogy has to line up the right way, otherwise you'll just come out of here with the wrong idea of what a protocol is. So the analogy is, think of the internet as a huge, enormous set of islands that are connected by different transportation systems. Bridges that include cars and trains, and you have boats, and you have airports and maybe bicycle bridges, but different transportation systems connecting different things. And you need specific ports to connect the different islands. So a car bridge can only connect to another car port bridge. A ship can only enter a ship port. A plane can only enter a plane port. And so protocols are the transportation mechanisms for entering different islands. Okay, I think I got half of you. Maybe. All right, maybe this will make more sense. Protocols, essentially, it's just a communication mechanism between two machines, and the protocol itself defines the rules of how the communication will operate. And we'll see some specific examples here in a second. So, first acronym for protocol is HTTP, which I'm sure all of you have heard about. It is the beginning of all websites. That stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. And what that means is implicitly it's going to go to a special port on the machine, typically port number 80. And that says when your browser goes to the server on port 80 using HTTP, it will say, please get me a web page and a web page only. And that's different from a different protocol like FTP, which you've maybe heard about too. FTP is a way of moving files around, and that's typically on port 21, 2, 1.
SFTP is 22.
Right. Okay. Yeah, FTP is on 21. So you can't typically use FTP on port 80, and you can't use HTTP on port 21, unless the servers are hooked up. But it typically, specific ports go specific places. And these are protocols that allow you to do special things. Oh, my goodness. Oh, I had better notes in here. Sorry. Okay. So back to the analogy. HTTP and FTP are like cars and trains that travel across the flat land, okay? So everybody can see where you're going, maybe even what you're carrying, how fast you're going, when you're gonna get there and stuff. It uses technology, not even really technology, but like clear text, so things are just transferred back and forth, and it's not very secure at all. So this is where the analogy gets good. You want to wrap those technologies in another whole layer called SSL, which hides what you're doing away from everybody else. So the analogy is a tunnel. So you take the exact same technologies that were in flat land and you put them underground so it's more secret. And the tunnel analogy is actually really used in the technical world too. I didn't just make this up. So SSL and TLS stands for Secure Socket Layer and Transport Layer Security. And so now you're connecting your entities, your servers, or your islands with tunnels, but it's still, on the inside of it, the exact same technology it was before. So now we have HTTPS, which uses port 443 typically. And it's the exact same protocol. You're still getting and requesting web pages, but now it's secured with double handshakes and it's tunnelized. And that's not a verb. Okay. And the second one that goes with that is SFTP, which is the exact same technology except wrapped in the SSL layer. Whew. Okay, that's backbone of protocols. Any questions so far? Yeah, go for it. Yes, that's actually going to be much later on. That uses the same technologies, but it's for a shell instead. And I don't know if it's technically a protocol at that point. Not sure. Somebody else can. When we get, I know you're looking at me. We'll get there. We'll get there later. We'll talk about that. Okay, so we have the internet, the web, how they're different, and then we have the protocols and how everything talks together. Yeah. So I learned that. Yeah. Yeah. So the internet. Right. Yeah, like VoIP is like voice over internet protocol. So VoIP is a internet technology, but it isn't a web technology. Right. And so there are many different internet technologies that are different from the web. Absolutely, yeah. Email. Yeah, email is a huge one. Think of any banking data, anything that wouldn't be accessible on the web, but is still sent over data. Everything else, essentially. There's this whole idea of a dark web that isn't searchable or scannable. It's not really dark, it's not indexed on the web. And so that's, yeah. So anywhere data transfers, that's the internet, but when it's viewable on a web page, that's the web. And they're very, very different. And the internet started 1970-ish or so and built into a thing called ARPANET, yeah. And then the web started in 1993 with Tim Berners-Lee, right? With his Mosaic browser. And some of you may know him personally, I don't know. DC is a wild place. Oh, I had that box there because TCP/IP has packages. It is much hotter than I thought it was going to be. Okay, any other questions on backbone and protocols? No? Good. Okay. These are the really simplistic ones now that you really will have heard a lot about, but I'm hoping to show how they get more advanced as they go together. So HTML, you've almost absolutely heard about. If you have it, that's totally cool. What it stands for is Hypertext Markup Language, and it does each of those exact things. It's marked up in a way that it structures the document, and those are the key words. So you put a tag, what's called at the very top, that says, I'm an HTML document. The browser downloads it and then renders it how it's supposed to be. And then inside you have this nested tree, it's called, of increasingly internal things that define what the text in it is. So hello world is a header, and that's inside the body, and it's marked up. The cool thing about it is that it's hypertext, so you can interlink other documents. This is simple. It's like 1995 again, but that's the essentials of HTML. And there are some other nice challengers, XHTML, DHTML, and all this other stuff. Now we're on HTML5, which includes a whole lot of these new markup things, so it's more semantic. And this is the struggle of making this talk. I could go deep into each one, but we're just going to skim across. CSS then is what works with HTML. HTML is just about marking up the structure of the document, and you want it to be semantic so that it makes sense to the reader and to the machine. You don't want to style in HTML. You want to put that in what's called a cascading style sheet. That's what CSS stands for. And it cascades like a waterfall is the idea. So you have different style sheets with rules. Like these are rules that define the padding of the text with the font size and the color and stuff. The rules cascade. You're having a good old time right now. So the closer, you can have multiple rule sheets, and the closer the rules are to the actual object, the last one being inline CSS, it has a stronger bearing on the rules. So if this was really close to the header, and there was another style sheet that had a different H1 rule higher up, this one would take more precedence because it cascades. And they also add up, and there's more rules about them. but that's CSS. And then JavaScript is technically called ECMA script. And I tried some lame jokes, Her Majesty and the Crusher of Souls. I started learning this stuff in like 05, and JavaScript that's when I was an undergrad, and JavaScript was not new, but it was not as mature as it is now, because it's so mature. And all of a sudden, I was paying attention to like PHP and these other technologies, and JavaScript just ate up everybody. So now you're running not only the backend servers on JavaScript, essentially, not only these massive front-end apps, but also the data that goes between them with JSON is all JavaScript. The simplest technologies kind of take over the world. So JavaScript is for allowing interactivity on your web pages. HTML is for markup, CSS is for styling, JavaScript is for interactivity. Now it comes the more kind of complicated ones that you may have heard about if you're a developer, but you might not know of, and you maybe have just slightly heard about. The DOM is the same HTML markup that we had before, but it's, let's just say, browser-fied. So once it's in the browser, it becomes the DOM, which is the document object model. And you use JavaScript and CSS to manipulate the DOM to do more things. So if you're on Facebook, for example, and you're adding a comment, what it's doing is it's taking JavaScript and it's inserting into the DOM. And the DOM has a tree-like structure with nodes at the end of it, so it can find certain elements, they're called. So it can find like paragraphs and headers and links and stuff. It can find the parameters on there, and it can interact with those things. So it's the same markup as before, but now it's called the DOM, and you use it to interact. Typically, you interact with the DOM with a thing called AJAX, which is asynchronous JavaScript in XML. This term was coined, I think, in like 03 or something, when AJAX and stuff was really coming about. And XML was the more popular data transfer technology at the time. You might still use XML, but you might use a few others too. So typically with HTTP, which is all about requesting and getting web pages and rebuilding them in the browser, you have to go out, ask the server for a whole new web page and bring it back. And that's the traditional relationship. You get the web page, you bring it back, you render the whole thing. AJAX is an asynchronous idea, so you don't have to do that anymore. You don't have to go ping the whole website. You just go ask for a little piece of it. JavaScript in your HTML file will just go get a little tiny piece of it asynchronously, not synchronized with the rest of the rendering process, and bring back some data. And now it might add to the DOM like it did before, or it might do something else, but it gets something from the server and brings it back to the web page without refreshing the page. That's AJAX. Now, it might do that. It might contact an API, which stands for Application Program Interface. Who's familiar with an API, generally speaking, more or less? Who's worked with one and like developed something with it? Okay, cool, yeah. So this is the Internet of Things now, where you have all these third-party services that offer, on a superficial level, Twitter and Instagram and stuff. So people have content in other places, but they want to put it all together. So your central machines have to use an API to contact those services and bring all the information back. Typically that can be done with AJAX, but this can also be done on the server side too. Yeah, go ahead.
Is this like a widget? Would that be an example of an application?
Not exactly, no. API is more of a general sense. So interface by itself is a very abstract word, which just means the touching of two things. So APIs are, it's like Meetup.com has an API that exposes some of their data. They have giant databases of you and I and our interactions and our comments, but most of it's private because it's behind passwords and profiles and stuff. But they expose some of that to developers who want to build other widgets or third-party stuff. Yeah, so it's kind of connected. But the API part itself is the action of going out, getting information, and bringing it back. It's kind of like an abstract term. And what you're physically getting, tangibly getting, because it's still digital, it's not physical, is typically JSON, and in some cases XML, depending on the service that you're using. So JSON is literally JavaScript object notation. It's how JavaScript stores its objects in the literal sense in its files in the code. So that's what JSON looks like, and XML stands for Extensible Markup Language. Whew, browser was the bigger one. And all these. The really difficult thing about learning this stuff is you don't really learn or understand it until you work with it. But hopefully this flyby will kind of give you some context to how all the things are interconnected. So I'll go through the server and then we'll stop for questions and see what we got. So we have the browser. Now the server side. You may have heard of LAMP and LEMP. LAMP this is your server stack, okay? So you have 4 sets of technologies working together in concert that create something bigger than if you just had pieces by themselves. It stands technically for Linux, Apache, MySQL, and the P stands for PHP. Last few years, a new server technology called Nginx has come out that's become very popular, and that's what the E stands for, because it's Nginx.
The length is not hard. It's hard.
I think so, yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna go through each one of these. I didn't really fill all these out too much. So Linux is an operating system that runs servers. It's open source. Golly, there's a whole lot that could be said about Linux. We're just gonna breeze over it. If you want, there's this really cool and fascinating man. He just goes by RMS, no one knows his real name. He writes some fascinating stuff, just go look him up. There's Apache and Nginx, which are kind of the same things. They're the software programs sitting on the server, listening, it's called, on port 80, waiting for instructions. So when your browser you're going to websites, you send a request, an HTTP request, and it's the server software that's actively running, listening for calls. And that will be, so on port 80 or 443, and it will then serve the web, web pages using a scripting language like PHP. So PHP is recursively, it stands for PHP Hypertext Preprocessor. And yeah, that's a weird, I don't know what else. I think I was going for 407 years. I had like 20 minutes left. It wasn't good. So PHP, which is what WordPress runs on, is a scripting language that will actually compiles the incorrect word, but it will pre-process. It will take a bunch of HTML elements together, combine it with data from a database, and create a web page, which Nginx or Apache then serves out. And that's the P part of the stack. The last part is MySQL, in some neighborhoods known as MariaDB now. MySQL is a structured query language now owned by Oracle that you can, I should have had an example, that you can interact with databases and get data. All 4 of those together, Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP, is the LAMP stack. All those together typically build what's called a CMS, which is the 23rd acronym. We're kicking some ass. All right. And that's known as a content management system. WordPress is a content management system because it allows you to, it's a system that manages content. All right, man. That's browser and server. Any questions there so far? Good. Yeah, go, please.
What's GNU?
GNU? Okay. I actually don't know what that stands for. It's GNU.
GNU is not Unix.
Not Unix?
No, GNU is not.
Not Unix. Okay. Yeah. Right, it's recursively PHP. So it stands for GNU is not Unix because it was written. It was a bunch of command line utilities that sort of started, and the kernel came later. And so I think you knew the answer to that. You did. Okay.
You skipped over it.
Yeah, I did. I got Stallman in there though, so he'll be happy. Any other questions? Server stuff? No, it's hard. Let's just move forward. Okay, interface. Rounding the bases. We're almost done. GUI stands. So yeah, I use the template, which has these awesome. I think San Francisco. Yeah, so that's the what's it building? I think so. Yeah, or Mrs. Doubtfire. So for half of them, I have real pictures, and half of them I just It's a free talk. You guys get what you get. Graphical user interface is a way of interfacing again with servers or desktop environment or a phone. It's anywhere where typically a person is interacting with a program on the other side. And the person-program connection is important because it's graphical. It's meant to be viewed on a screen. And that might seem arbitrary or weird to bring up, but the fact of the matter is, beyond us, machines are interfacing with each other all the time, so we need graphical ones to more easily interact with things. With the graphical user interface then comes this concept of WYSIWYG, or what you see is what you get. This is an example of the WYSIWYG editor in WordPress, because it will change your elements based on your styling. For like the hello world is a header, and this is sample post is like the paragraph. That's what WYSIWYG stands for. What you see is what you get. I put what you see is almost what you get, because WYSIWYG, it's a lie. It's just the biggest lie in technology. Particularly now with responsive designs, you're making like 4 websites in one. It's really hard to build a WYSIWYG editor that 4 or 8, I don't know, whatever, that does explicitly what it would be on every single site. But that's what it means. So with LAMP then is these three other ones, MAMP, WAMP, and XAMPP, which just change out the operating system underneath it. Mac, Windows, and the XAMPP project stands for cross-platform. It is bundled. It's a graphical user interface that allows you, it's like a downloadable package, like a software package, that allows you to run a server environment on your local machine. Who doesn't know what these things are? Absolutely everybody does? I'll presume one person's lying. So if you're not using these and you're a WordPress developer, this should be one of the things that I personally would highly recommend that you go do, because you want to create a development environment and a production environment. If you're running a sole WordPress website out there and it gets hacked or something, you're just SOL. But if you have a backup on your local machine that is very similar or even identical to the one that's on your production environment, then you have some backups that are working. These make it very easy. They're very entry level. So if you do nothing else from the end of this talk, just go home and research these a little bit so you can start running servers on your local machine. There's a lot of tutorials out there. It's much easier than it would be. Some have the double Ps. There's like 3 major P languages, which is PHP, Perl, and Python. I think technically they stand for Perl because only weirdos like Python. So those are the simplified, more populist interfaces that allow non-technical people to work with machines. Then there's advanced interfaces that allow the connections of machine to machine and more technical developers to machine. So the first is the CLI, or command line interface, which allows you to run pretty much the exact same programs that you could run graphically by just typing in a few keywords. And this is known as the prompt or the terminal. It has a special name on Windows, I forget. So you can type in, that's almost, I think, a real command. All right, I think, except -A, I don't know if that does anything. Real technical people use command prompts, or the command line, but this is the second thing that I would encourage you to go learn. There's a lot of good tutorials out there too. It's much simpler than you think, and you'll get really powerful with it too. Bash is an example of the command line interface. It's one of the types of what are known as shells that interface with the machine. So there was a BSH at first. Michael Bash, or Michael Bourne, was it, I think? No. Yeah. And then there's like a bunch of shells that came out. ZCH is really famous on. Yeah. And then Bourne, again, is like a cutesy name on it. That stands for Bash. And Bash is one of the more, not necessarily approachable, but it's the one that I think comes standardized in Ubuntu and Debian and stuff. So it's what a lot of introductory developers use. Bash is one of the more famous of the shells. With that then is the secure shell, or secret shell, which allows you to create a shell connection to your servers. You asked it, right? Yeah. So all you're doing is you're creating you're starting a new shell instance on your machine through the SSL layer, right? I mean, that's straightforward. But that's all it is. So you're doing the command line instead of on your local machine. You're just SSHing into the other machine. Does that kind of help a little bit? So you can do commands on there instead. And SSH is not new, but it's newer than some of the older ways of creating a shell on the server, and it's more secure. So that's what I think. There's maybe some newer ideas for SSH, but that's typically the standard for interfacing with other machines. Last one, number 30, VVV. Who knows what VVV is? Great. Okay. So VVV stands for Varying Vagrants. It's pretty much, let's use the word identical to MAMP or WAMP. It basically allows you to run a server on your local machine. But there's no graphical user interface for it. There's no pointing and clicking or drag and dropping. You use a piece of software called Vagrant, and it has recipes for installing new servers. So VVV, which is the third thing that you should go look up, is a project that was once run by a company called 10up, which is one of the bigger WordPress firms in the world, I think. And it's an open source project now. And it's a really great way for installing WordPress. It comes with like Ubuntu Linux and Nginx out of the box, I think. And it downloads the trunk of WordPress and all these other plugins and stuff. and allows you to run a server on your machine. Okay, all right, so that's interface and advanced interface. Any questions on those? Yeah. Ma'am? Yeah. Right. So when you're running a server on a desktop, you get access, you get 100% resources, right? So as opposed to maybe a shared instance or a different server that might be held back because it's sharing with other users. So both are going to be really fast already, depending on your machine. VVV is more powerful in the sense that MAMP is weird because it like puts HT docs in like your applications folder or something. It's been a few years since I've used it, but it's like it creates like an Apple package, like an application on your machine, and then it doesn't. VVV is a virtual technology that creates a separate instance of Ubuntu all by itself. So you can create an identical instance of what your server would be, or your production server, or your test server would be on your local machine without the weird configuration issues that MAMP, for example, offer. Yeah, you have one second.
So with MAMP is just a really amazing stack that you put on your machine. It's just a setup of Apache, MySQL, PHP.
Yeah.
But VVV is actually configured for WordPress, so it's going ahead to the one that gets worked out and getting configuration set up for you.
That's great.
Tailor to WordPress.
Right.
As opposed to like you go in and you pick what version you want or whatever. It's a lot more guesswork in your.
Yeah, MAMP is a general framework for building all sorts of websites, or general package, where VVV is built specifically for WordPress sites and WordPress only. And it has a really active developer community, really technical people who are building more technical stuff for it. So you can create more websites on the fly. I use, like, for as an example, the .dev top level domain, and I have like 40 different projects that I'm working on, all using that .dev. So PatchWorks.dev, yeah, and they're all WordPress sites that I can load up instantly because of all these command line utilities. Cool. Any other questions with these two? Was this help? Yeah, go ahead. VVV? Yeah. So if you just search it, the GitHub page itself will be really helpful. You have to install Vagrant and Virtual Box, yeah. Or you can use Parallels or the other one, dboxes. VMware, yeah. So you essentially just need Vagrant, which is a Ruby script that handles all of your desktop boxes for you, all your server boxes. And then you'll need a virtualization machine, which is VirtualBox is free and I think runs really nicely, but you can also use a different virtual machine too. Then you'll need like Git and some other things to like clone stuff and run stuff. It's a really great learning experience for learning all these technologies kind of all at once. This is a very simple walkthrough. And the cool thing about it is when I want to start a server, all I have to type in my command line is vagrant space up, and then it just boots up the whole thing. There's a recipe that runs through. It will update everything. It provisions the server. Will add in new sites. We'll pull things down from the internet. So that's how you get started. If you just look it up, it'll give you instructions. Yeah. Please, yeah.
If you want it, there's one of the early bits is which is just kind of set it up. It goes through installing a VirtualBox and installing that. It's just very comprehensive. So.
I got foggy headed like 20 minutes ago, so I really appreciate you checking that. No, thank you. Yeah. Yep, yeah. I was actually there in Minneapolis. Terrible graphics on his actual presentation, but really great information. And he's one of the guys that has a few of the command line pieces, so you can. What do you remember what his project is called? Either of you two actually. Brad Parks' project. It's like VVW or something weird like that. I think it's just VV actually. We're complicated people. Okay. Any other questions? These are all the terms that we had. Pretty good, right? How do we do? 7:56. All right. I wasn't timing. I guess I was 36 minutes. Pretty close. These are all the terms I didn't use. I think there's like 48 of them or something. Yeah, and these are all available online too. So you can grab it's a PDF file too. So you can grab this.
What does PDF stand for?
Personal flotation device. No, it doesn't. That's not even the right order. Okay, all right. That's it. Okay. Okay, thank you, everybody. You guys can ask me questions if you like.
Very good.
Thank
You're
you.
a very brave man for trying to decipher all of those different
Thank you.
things.
Oh, we have one viewer on the stream.
Yeah.
Yeah.